Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. And I've got a Canadian entrepreneur coming out of Toronto, Scott Gabdullin. And he's got extensive experience and background in business marketing for big brand names such as TD Ameritrade, Marshalls, Toyota. And he's parlayed that into becoming an entrepreneur. He's going to talk about SEO, lead generation, marketing. And I'm really happy to have such a outstanding entrepreneur on my show. So Scott, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, and definitely look forward to sharing as much knowledge as possible with your audience.
Yeah, I know you and me, we share a lot of common interests and experiences. So talk about how where you got started, and I'm excited to dive right into the show.
Well, I took a little bit of a long journey to get to entrepreneurship and marketing, I guess. I started my career in engineering. So, first generation minority immigrant, came to Canada and went to school for the highest paying career, which was engineering, according to Google. And that's where I went into. So, started a career in engineering, worked for advanced micro devices, kind of got disillusioned with the whole process of working for big companies and realizing that there's probably very little chance that I could build a business of my own in engineering industry unless I spend the next decade or 2 decades just working my way through the system. And so make a serious pivot and took a lot of beating along the way and kind of went to digital marketing. Started with web design, started to work with small businesses, got a job in the corporate world and agencies working with, like you said, TD Bank and all the big brands like that. Eventually building up to my own agency that I run now, as well as a portfolio of a number of small businesses that we own, either in partnerships or solely our own.
Yeah, quite a very interesting story, and it sounds like you accumulated your wealth and into assets, into companies and businesses, and so talk about what's really interesting is business and equities. Kind of these are really great businesses because you have the multiple, and
Yeah.
a lot of people just kind of they don't understand that, and they just go to a traditional 9 to 5. But how to talk about kind of big overview how to build a small business from scratch.
You gotta really be into taking a beating. You gotta enjoy high levels of stress, and you won't have any ceiling, but you will definitely be missing any kind of a safety net, right? There is the bottom doesn't exist as well as the top. So I would say that's entrepreneurship in a nutshell for me. But if you are looking to get into small business, if you're looking to run something of your own, we start small businesses all the time. So I have a 3D printing company that I started in partnership 50-50 with someone else. We have health and wellness companies, the same setup. We have bookkeeping business. And the best ways that I found in launching small businesses from scratch is actually to build a website less than 24 to 48 hours. Don't spend too much time on building something that looks amazing. You don't need to win awards with your website. You need something that tells potential customers what it is that you do, why you do it, and how you do it, and then start running ads. That works almost every single time. It starts to get a bit more complicated when you go into really, really expensive B2B niches. If you are into offering analytics services, data science, and you're competing with Accenture, IBM, it might be a little bit more difficult to stand out and compete. But if you're doing something like bookkeeping or lawn care and tree removal, those niches are perfect for ads. You run the ads, you get your first few leads, you do provide them with great customer service, you close them, you provide the actual, you fulfill the order, and then that just they take the profits, reinvest back into your marketing campaigns, and then over time invest into SEO, which is organic search, invest into social media. If you have for example, you run a podcast, invest into podcasting and start to build up a brand over time. That's how we like to do it, and that formula has worked for us, which is why we kind of gravitated towards more traditional as it's now called, boring businesses. But for us, they're not boring. We enjoy it. It's kind of taking the route that Cody Sanchez in a way took as well, if anyone follows her on YouTube.
Yeah, I really love that. And what really strikes me is because a lot of people, when they hear about ads and kind of like, for example, I know a lot of individuals, they had a 9 to 5, and then they
Yeah.
ventured out to become entrepreneurs, and they actually leveraged their contacts and built a brand and business. And if you know how to, run ads and kind of target and niche market, you can do very well, which is sounds like what you are doing. One thing what is really interesting is a lot of audience. They could be doctors, dentists. They own their private practice, and
Yeah.
kind of the doctor mentality is don't trust anybody, do it all yourself. And
Okay.
you talked about 50-50 partnership and
Yeah.
all of that. How do you protect yourself from bad business partners, people stealing from you,
Yeah.
kind of these things?
Well, I think that there is no surefire way to ensure that that never happens. Um, we like to do our due diligence. We obviously like to make sure that everything is contractual and everything is put into on a paper. That's one. Two, we like to partner up with people we've known for a while, and there is at least some kind of relationship that's already in place. I don't necessarily mean that it's a family or a friend, but it's someone you've known for a while. I have somebody I worked with 10 years ago, and we've kind of come together and formed a business. So things like that is what we go after. So in terms of kind of forming a partnership, I guess, yeah, contracts, relationships, making sure that they're good people. And the other part of it is making sure that they are responsible for something and you're responsible for the other half, right? So splitting those responsibilities, not stepping on each other's toes is extremely important. I've had experiences where business did not go well and we had to split up because both partners were responsible for the same thing, right? So someone is always going to be better than another at one thing, and you don't want to make your partner feel like he's not good at it or she's not good at it and you're better. And so that can go sour over time. So, I mean, simple thing like that, but just doing your due diligence is probably the first step. And then making sure that as a relationship progresses, both of you know your responsibilities as a business gets bigger. Both of you are going to be busy, just responsible for your own parts of that business.
Yeah, interesting. I just, they're very trust and key. And so what is interesting is you talk about what's interesting is you have SEO, and a lot
Yeah.
of the guests have been SEO for like small business, but you do enterprise
Yes.
SEO and
Yeah.
SaaS and lead generation. How is that different from small enterprise?
So I started in a small business, started with servicing small businesses for SEO. I think everyone who gets into digital marketing usually would start with small businesses because the TAM is so big. The total addressable market is so much bigger. So it's easy to find clients. We all gravitate toward that first. It's also slightly easier to close clients. The approval process doesn't take too long. There's a single person running a business. You just have to talk to that person as long as the price is right and you're able to offer them something that they agree with. You can typically close that client. The problem starts with the budgets. Budgets are small, right? And SEO is no longer a new channel, and it's been around and has matured, has become more competitive, especially for doctors and lawyers and accountants. It's not as cheap and it's not free for sure. And so budgets have to be healthy. If you're a lawyer, you're probably looking a good $10,000-$20,000 in paid advertising to get a real impact. And so because everybody's advertising, everybody's doing SEO. And so over time we realized that small businesses don't have as big of a budget to work with. And we can't take them on $1,000, $2,000 retainers, but then we have to have a lot of folks on the team to service those clients. So to get to $1 million for $2,000 a retainer, that's a lot of clients to service. At 100, a couple hundred. What you can do instead is you can go for enterprise, mid-level or enterprise companies that will pay you $10, $15, $20,000 a month. And now you're dealing with one client instead of dealing with 20. So you don't need as big of a team. Your headcount is smaller. Your capital expenditure is much smaller, and so it's just a lot easier to run a business, and it's a lot easier to scale, in my opinion. Just because those businesses that are mid-sized to enterprise, they already know they need marketing. You don't really have to sell them on marketing. It's more about on selling them on an outcome or agreeing on an outcome, right? So what is it that you're going to bring them in terms of those primary KPIs and secondary KPIs that they're going after? How many signups, how many conversions, demo requests, whatever it might be. So that's what we, realized over time. And that's why we just decided that let's go For more mid to enterprise, it's harder to sell, harder to close. But once you do, it's a lot easier to fulfill, a lot less headcount required to fulfill as a result work. And so we target that market. Smaller TAM, but in my opinion, bigger opportunity.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because the guest before you was she was a coach and she was telling me how she closes how instead of clients that pay 100, 200, she closes clients for long term, like six
Yeah,
months, 10,000, 15,000, and it helps, it's
exactly.
easier, it's scalable.
Exactly.
What really, yeah, and what sounds like you're doing the same thing. The other question is, I love talking to entrepreneurs such as yourself. And so, where do you see the future of digital marketing? Technology is rapidly evolving. We've got AI now, and what should we be prepared for?
Chaos, a lot of noise. AI is going to bring a lot of noise. There's going to be obviously a lot of content created at scale. Quite a bit of that content is going to be just purely AI generated. So it's going to be hard to distinguish what's real, what's not. I think that authenticity is going to become key. So usually, if we think about history and the way technology works, the pendulum swings to the extremes. And when AI reaches a certain point of saturations, most of us will probably be searching for that authenticity. Like, it's just human nature. When we get too much of something, we want the opposite. Whether it's politics or life or business, whatever it might be. So too much of anything is never good. And so we kind of expect that those who are still investing into, let's say, human content, human first, video content or written content probably will succeed, but it's just going to be a very, very difficult transition, figuring out how to sell those services or how to produce that content in a noise that's being created by new technology. So AI will make everything way, way more saturated, way more noisier. At the same time, it's going to create a lot of opportunities for small businesses. Now they don't, with just one tool, they might be able to go and create a lot of stuff on their own without need for external, resources like agencies or marketers, right? A click of a button, you might have a whole video running. A click of a button, you might have the entire podcast transcribed, something that people used to pay money for. You could get it translated to Japanese and Spanish and French with just AI, which is something that we used to pay for again. So opportunities are endless, but at the same time, there's going to be quite a bit of chaos that's going to take place. So that's what we envision. SEO is going to get harder, in my opinion. And I think as brands start to realize is that SEO is no longer one channel that you can just rely on consistently. You actually have to diversify. So a lot of platforms are popping in. TikTok is a good example of that. AI is not the only technology that's changing the landscape. So you will need to be on a lot of different platforms, and that means building a brand. I think you got to be comfortable putting yourself out there, whether it's a company or a person, founder-led organization, and talking about the business. Authenticity, personal connection, people relate to people, and so that's going to become even more important in the age of AI, in my opinion.
Yeah, interesting. You're very very forward thinking, and you have so kind of the next question is because it sounds like you've what you have this system, and what is your advice for entrepreneurs looking to diversify their portfolio of businesses, and
Yeah.
what are you curious to hear?
Yeah, so I think the advice that a lot of entrepreneurs provide, like focus on one thing, is a great advice. So just find focus and focus on one thing and work on that thing. It's a great advice. That being said, I break it in a way. I don't follow it fully. What I recommend is find an area expertise that you enjoy and you excel at. For me, that would be, as an example, digital marketing. I love digital marketing. I built an agency in that area, right, in that industry. I have a team, so 10, 11 people. We're highly outsourced. We're in Philippines and soon to be in South America in terms of our talent. And what I do is when I go outside of digital marketing and let's say start a new business, the only difference there is that it might be 3D printing business, but I'm still doing marketing. someone else is doing 3D printing. It might be bookkeeping business, but I'm still doing marketing. And then someone else is doing bookkeeping. So figure out what it is that you're good at. And if you want to build a portfolio, bring that same expertise over to that business. Right. So when I start a new company, essentially what I do is that I just take that company, take that website, and I tell my team is that it's a new client. And so there is no difference in the process. SOPs, standard operating procedures, are still the same. They go, they create content, the websites, the ads, the SEO. It's all the same. The only thing that I had to do is build the agency, right? So that's what I kind of mean by focus on that one skill or one enterprise. And then if there is an opportunity to apply that same skill, that same enterprise into other businesses, then diversify and go elsewhere and start other things. Because if you try to build a new SaaS company, for example, while running an agency, while having a traditional business all by your own, it's going to be tough. It's a lot of work. It's hard. I see some people trying to do it, and I think too many things to chase, and it's just gonna over time become a problem. And in that case, it's best to just choose one and focus on one.
Yeah. Yeah, really interesting, and I love, like, again, I love your approach, and basically the same skill, and it's the same thing, same process applied just to different scenarios. So you can, you just basically minimize all of the extraneous. If people wanted to find you and find out more about you and reach out to you, you obviously have a lot of experience and expertise. So how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, if you just Google my name, Scott Gabdullin, pretty much all my profiles appear nicely on Google. Something that we do is we practice SEO, we preach SEO, and we practice on our own brands. So you'll find all the websites, whether it's my enterprise SEO agency, authorityfactors.com, or lead gen business, Lyra.io. And that's pretty much a good place to start. And if you don't want to use Google for whatever reason, I am on LinkedIn. As well, Scott Gabdullin, or on Twitter and Facebook and elsewhere. That would be probably the best way to find me.
Yeah, awesome. And I really enjoyed this. And for all the audience, be sure to give Scott's socials a like and follow, and check him out and work with him. And thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Christopher, for having me. Enjoy the conversation, and definitely hoping that your audience found something useful.